From Chicago's CAN TV, this is Chicago Newsroom.
Well, hi there, and welcome to Chicago Newsroom here on CAN TV. I am Ken Davis, welcoming you back to another conversation about Chicago, the city we love to sit around and, yak about. 21 days. That's how much time you've got to decide who you want to be your next mayor, your alderman, and your treasurer if you live in Chicago. At least that's the number of days as we record this show on February the 5th. And the most remarkable thing is that with 14 candidates for mayor, or however many it is, nobody seems to have broken out of the pack as a definitive leader yet. There's a kind of a mind-numbing sameness to those almost daily forums where every candidate's given a minute to respond to a package of, 10 or some number of incredibly similar questions. And in my own humble opinion, it's kind of dumbing down the whole process. I'd really like to see some active debates between 2 or 3 candidates on just a couple of topics. We can't do anything about that here at the little show, but what we can do is this. We here at Chicago Newsroom are inviting every candidate to stop by for a relaxed conversation about our city and how they try to improve it. We've been honored by our response. We have a pretty impressive library of conversations, all somewhere between about 45 and 55 minutes in length. And you can see our entire collection at chicagonewsroom.org. Or you can see our replay schedule for all the mayoral candidates on CAN TV there too. So lots going on. Anyway, today's guest was an alderman for 2 terms, one of them during Rich Daley's last 4 years, and the other during Rahm Emanuel's first term. That's particularly interesting because his ward included a lot of what we now know colloquially as Lincoln Yards. There's been a speculation that the reason Emanuel worked so diligently to redraw that ward, the second in 2010, was that after the 2010 redistricting, was that the mayor had a strong desire to consolidate as much of his future massive project into one ward as possible, and at the same time get rid of one of his fiercest critics. We'll find out whether that's true or not. Anyway, the mayor and his mappers redrew that second ward to accomplish that consolidation of real estate, but also to exclude Bob Fioretti's residence. So it's with great interest today that we invite to our table the former second ward alderman and the aforementioned mayoral candidate, Bob Fioretti.
Good to be here.
Thank you so much for being here. It's just a pleasure to have you here. We've got, as with all the candidates, we've got a lot to cover, but...
Should I just give yes, no?
Yeah. And could you please confine your answers to 45 seconds?
Right.
I understand that there's a place for that. I really do. But I mean, I don't know if you feel the same way I do. I'm just beginning to, I know everybody's answer to the 10 questions, right? So it's like, how about we try to break out of that?
What's interesting is, I got in this race because I was not hearing from the candidates talking about the real issues. Mm-hmm. And we can talk about what they are, but what were the solutions? We know crime, education, this budget problem. I got into the race, and now what I'm hearing is they parrot my answers. I was at the Women's Forum the other day, and one of the candidates down the line there, exactly what I've been saying on crime, exactly what I'm saying. All the reform measures that they talk about, I've introduced in the city council. Most of these people, half of them, were against me on those reform issues that they're now embracing, and the other half stood silently in the weeds and said nothing, and now they're embracing the same ideas.
Mm-hmm. Well, you've seen the fracas that broke out over the Channel 32 debates, right?
Pure nonsense on Channel 32. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what poll they're looking at, but the polls are changing every day. Mm-hmm. I do know that the Burke 4 are all within a certain range. Willie's next. I'm 6 right now. I've moved up dramatically in the last 2 weeks. And people all around the city are reacting to my candidacy. I don't know about the other ones, but I do hear it when I'm on the north side, south side, west side, about that people are going to vote for me. So I feel good.
If you had the chance to just go one-on-one on like a half-hour TV debate with somebody, who would it be? Who would be your top 2 or 3 candidates you'd love to debate?
It's unfortunate because, again, I'm hearing the reform ideas that I've talked about are that they're all embracing, whether it's term limits, smaller city council, getting rid of aldermanic privilege, making sure that we have an ethically responsible government. I mean, I have the integrity and I have the experience in City Hall, and I know how to get things done. So I look at it and I don't see any of the candidates that can come up to match me on what we can do here.
I guess we do have to start with what's in the news these last couple of days, in the last week or so specifically, the Burke, Danny Solis, Victor Reyes dust up.
Burke, who?
Yeah, Burke, who? Yeah,
and that's
You've
a
never
reaction
heard
from
of,
those.
You've never heard of Alderman
No,
Burke?
well, Alderman Burke was the one person who really stood up and opposed me on every reform measure. In 2010, when I talked about changes to the pension system and stop taking pension holidays, Ed Burke got up on the city council after I spoke. We were forced to take pension holidays. I'm sitting in my chair and I'm like, forced by who? And then he goes on a litany of everything. And we are, as I'm sitting there. I mean, you know, if we would have done a lot of changes in 2010, then we wouldn't have been in this fiscal mess that we talk about now. And let's be frank, he's been the chairman of the Finance Committee since the 90s. Our credit ratings have gone down. Our pensions debt has gone up, and he's become very rich in that position. I mean, he's the only one that it's benefited in the city council.
Well, you know, this is interesting to me because, you know, obviously Danny Solis has been around a while too, and he was a very influential alderman with zoning and so forth. But one of the characters that has come out in the last few days is Victor Reyes. And Victor Reyes, during your time, I think, would have been the head of IGA, right, Intergovernmental Affairs?
No, he wasn't there then.
He wasn't. So was it before you?
But during the remap, and some of the discussions, you would have assumed that he was in charge of the Hispanic caucus and doing what needed to be done.
Well, he started out with HDO, right?
Yes, he did, which was a corrupt Democratic organization anyway. H stood for Hispanic Democrat.
Not the CDO, the
yes,
HDO. Yeah.
But it was a corrupt organization. A lot of people went to prison off of it. The scandals were well known, and it was set up by Richie Daley, so to help them.
So you're saying that when this remap that we talked about that happened in 2015, I'm sorry, in the midpoint of Rahm Emanuel's thing, that Victor Reyes was a part of that.
Well, Victor
do you
Reyes
think that he
was.
had something to do
Oh,
with
he had
you
a lot
being
to do with
mapped
it.
out?
Yes, he did. But you see,
And
what
why?
happened in the second ward in the areas that we're in now, that went to, and the north, when they moved me all the way up north, my ward, the historic black ward, was chopped up for about 5 or 6 different wards. And a large portion of that went to Danny Solis, and a large portion went to Walter Burnett. People who say will never challenge a developer. I think the whole aim was to make sure that development went the way the developers wanted, and the campaign contributions went to the alderman. I think you may know that I made a pledge when I first ran not to accept developer money. I turned back $100,000 in my first year. But some of these things that we see that Danny Solis was ruling on down here, all went, it was
Down
all
here, you
campaign
mean?
contributions.
Really not down here, you mean?
In the 62 acres over at Roosevelt and Clark.
Okay.
One day.
We should, I'm sorry, we got plenty of time to lay this out. We're talking about two different things here. Roosevelt and Clark is the so-called 78.
Right, it is 62 acres.
62
but yes.
acres, but
Right.
it's called the 78
Yeah,
because
the
it's
new
the 78th
community,
community.
yes.
But you know, it hadn't really occurred to me until recently when all these stories came out that happens to be in Danny Solis's ward, right?
Right, which
And
was my ward.
he's the head of the zoning committee.
Which was my ward,
So now
yes.
you had that space.
Yes.
You had that before the remap.
Yes, and I
So
had,
you had parts of what's now Lincoln Yards, and
well,
you had.
no, what happened was they
I'm so
moved it
confused.
all the way up the new second ward, and then they gave me control of that new second ward for zoning purposes. You know, it happened midway during the term. I should
Yeah,
be,
yeah.
I
Oh,
should be
that's right, that's
representing
right.
the people
You
who
know,
elected me.
I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
That's
I
okay.
just finally got this. I just finally understood this, that yes, because it was the 2010 census, so it was technically the 2010 remap that didn't happen until about, what, 2013 or something?
Right. It should not have gone into effect until the next election. But what they did was, halfway through, they said, everybody's going to be in charge of these, And a letter came from, I think, Mel and Burke, maybe Solis was on it, saying, oh, it's going to go into effect now. One day, Danny Solis showed up at a meeting with a developer who wanted some minor things, which turned out to be very major later on. And I said, what are you doing here? He said, well, I got a call that I should be here by the developer. I said, you did? He said, yes. You know, things are going to happen soon. I said, well, this is going to be a one-year project, and the remap doesn't take effect until a couple years down the line. He said, no, we're planning on doing it sooner. So you know,
yes, I remember that now. Yeah.
This whole thing was contrived to deprive all the voters of the new Second Ward and the old Second Ward of their democratic values of voting for an alderman. And at the same time, I think it was meant to help developers not listen to the community and to force that upon them.
I have an odd feeling that a lot of our viewers are kind of just completely lost at this point.
Yes.
And the reason for that is because, well, just the arcaneness of redistricting Chicago wards. But the second ward thing was just outrageous beyond anything that we've seen in a long time. So let's sort of, if it's possible, just give me a kind of a general idea of what your original second ward was. It went all the way down to Roosevelt and Clark.
No, it went down to 37th Prairie, Calumet, Giles, way into Bronzeville.
Way down south, into Bronzeville.
And then it came up along the lakefront, McCormick Place, Soldier Field. It stopped at Jackson at that point. I had the Sears Tower. It took this area in here, which is the medical district, but at the same time it kept going far west. Once it hit Western, it bloomed all the way through, and then by the time it hit California, it was lake to beyond the expressway.
Wow.
To Roosevelt.
Okay, so kind of C-shape,
yes.
Well, kind of a backward C-shape.
Yes.
Thing. So you start out, you start out way down south, and come up through McCormick Place, and then go out west.
Yes.
But the second ward that was redrawn isn't even a good word. The creation of a new second ward had almost nothing to do with the original one, right?
No, and
we're all familiar with it. Well, those of us who care about these things are familiar with what a crazy shape thing it is now.
Right.
It's been called the lobster because it's got this big blob and then these kind of tentacles that go down. But so you actually were the alderman of that crazy ward for a while.
Yes, I was.
I forgot that.
And the only way I could spend the so-called menu money was, I viewed it constitutionally. Some of the other colleagues spent money in their new portions that they took over, but to help the people who elected me. The only thing I had up in the new second ward was the authority over zoning, which was as crazy as it can get. I mean, I look back on what the city council did to deprive voters. Not only was it illegal in the first instance, but it just cut the heart out of all these citizens to do what the politicians wanted instead. It was a political move, and that's all it was.
All right, so we've spent a lot of time on this, but I think it's really important to set the scene of how you come into all of this. So in 2015, you can no longer really run for alderman because, well, A, you don't live in the ward anymore.
Right.
And B, even if you wanted to move into the ward, it's an entirely different constituency.
They issued a letter that said, even though I didn't live in that new ward, I can run in that new ward. But then the next time, if I wanted to, I would have to then move up there.
Oh, I see.
And I said, I'm not going to play this game. I remember the night before the map came out, no alderman really had seen the map until about 25 minutes before city council occurred, and they voted for it.
I bet Ed Burke had seen it.
Ed Burke, Mel, and maybe one other one had seen it, and the mayor. What happened was I got a call at about 10:35, and they said, which ward do you want to live in? 27th Ward or 28th Ward? I said, well, I gave him some words that I know I can't use on this show, but I said, I'm not playing that game with my constituents. I'm not playing that game with the people of this city. I mean, do what you think. Well, they ended up with the 28th Ward, one precinct jumping the expressway, and I live in the 28th Ward where my home is now. So I look back and the whole thing is corrupt. I mean, that's the only way to describe it.
That's an entirely separate discussion.
Yes, it is.
Is how we draw our districts in this country, nationally and locally. But Chicago is an especially creative case. And
yes, it is.
We've seen it happen for a long time. So let's be clear about this Ed Burke thing. Has Ed Burke done fundraisers for you? I'm asking everybody this. Have you ever received money directly from Ed Burke?
I don't know if I have. I don't look at my campaign contributions. I mean, Ed Burke and I have always been at best in arm's length. As I said earlier, he opposed me on every reform measure that I brought up before the city council, including disclosure of if you have a conflict of interest, you shouldn't be in the council when we're voting on it. You can't be in the committee room, which probably would have disqualified him from being chairman of the finance committee. So Ed Burke is Ed Burke, and he does what he does.
And I'm curious about your relationship today with Rahm Emanuel. It's been kind of all over the map. I mean, you have been one of the fiercest critics of Rahm Emanuel, and yet you endorsed him the last time around.
I sat 3 meetings, 3 1-hour meetings with him, 3 1-hour meetings with Chewy. I think and it was a gut-wrenching issue for me. And you know, I can always say I'll sit on the sidelines, but there was one singular issue, and it was the finances. Chewy will be a great legislator for us, and I think it's going to turn out even better that he is a congressman to help bring funds into the city and work with our set of city congressmen, especially with like Mike Quigley, and he can bring in funds into this city. And again, it was that sole issue on finances. I said it that day. He and I disagree on 99.9% of where we stand.
You and Chewy Garcia?
No, me and Rahm.
Oh, Rahm, okay.
But we were in fragile state. We're even in a more fragile state today because we have to come up with really, whoever gets sworn in on May 15th, by September 1st, has to find really $400 million new dollars. And you know, we can't raise property taxes anymore. It's driving people out. We need to bring people into this city and invite them to live here.
Well, that kind of gets me back, circling back to what we were talking about at the very beginning, that one of my frustrations with the necessity, I guess, for brevity in these conversations with our future, in our job interviews with all of you, is that this really deep issue of finance just gets turned into a kind of a talking point. It's like, well, we can't push the can down the road anymore or something like that. What you said is true. We cannot put any more pressure on property taxes. But we do have these bills. They are coming due, and they're going to come due no matter what. And so I turn to you. On your first day, you're going to have to deal with this. What are you going to do on your first day as mayor to try to put this debt down?
Well, first of all, I pledged to have town hall meetings on the budget. At the same time, I'm going to have ward meetings throughout the city. I will have there's 50 wards until we make it a smaller city council. But I'll have one throughout the year in each ward. I think, first of all, 6 years ago I proposed a commuter tax, 1% of a commuter tax on people that live in Indiana, Wisconsin, and the suburbs that come into this city to work. And they can write it off on their federal income taxes, would generate $300 million. All that would have to go to the pension fund. That's a measure of equality, justice, and they come into this city, they want safe streets, good streets, ambulance services,
Fire
fire,
protection.
the whole bit. And where do they spend their money? They go back to wherever their homes are, and they pay property taxes in those suburbs, those counties, those different states. They don't spend it here, the vast majority. I am not in favor of raising any more taxes on anybody in the city of Chicago. And we have to look at ways to close this gap. Video poker, so that's $300 million. Video poker would probably bring in about $75 million at this point.
Still, you still believe that? I mean, I think the
yes.
evidence seems to be going the other direction.
No,
right?
but you read the Sun-Times article, there's certain startup costs and what needed to be done, and now it's on the rise. We've got cities all across this state that are using video poker to help their revenues. I think it was a little bit faulty on the article that was written in the Sun-Times. If we can't find another $25 million to crunch the budget at this point, then we're in trouble. We have a $10.2 billion budget. This year it's $400 million, the next year $600, $800, then $1 billion. We will be paying in 4 years into our pension fund $2 billion. We're going to have to work with the state, and we're going to have to work with DC on some legislative agendas to bring money in to help bring that down.
You mean work with the state and with the feds to give us more money to help retire that?
Yes.
Where do you stand on constitutional amendments and trying to limit the benefits to existing pensions?
Do you want me to laugh? Because Ron proposed, it was my first meeting that I went to since I was no longer an alderman on December 12th. And what I heard was he proposed, I'll call it the 4 C's, cannabis, casinos, cash, and a constitutional amendment. The constitutional amendment, let's say it happens, because it'll take 3-4 years to get that approved by the voters. But let's say that we're 3 years down the line. If I started with the city today and the governor signs this constitutionally approved by the people amendment tomorrow, it won't affect me. So I'm going to be working for the city 20, 30 years, and I'm going to have another 20, 30 years of a pension benefit. So who's kidding who on what it's going to do? I mean, it doesn't work that way. So, it's a red herring thrown out there.
I see. So your position on it is it's just not.
It's not even worth consideration.
Worth the bother because
right.
it is a red herring.
Yes.
All right, but now one of the things that Emanuel is talking about is trying to, and I confess to not really fully understanding this stuff, and I think that's part of the benefit that it has is that most of us don't understand it. But in some way or another, to sell some of the pension debt, monetize that, skim the top off of the profits and use that to pay off the rest of the pension. I don't understand it, but they're called pension obligation bonds. You?
If we want to kick down the can down the road further, another 10, 20 years, so be it. But that's all that does. And it really puts at the end of it.
It doesn't retire any of the debt?
No, it doesn't. And in fact, the impact is more devastating. It'll hurt those that are left in this city in 10 or 20 years, and it'll just crush them at that point.
We got off of the whole Lincoln Yards thing, and I want to stay with it for just a moment longer. Just the concept of Lincoln Yards and what your sense of it is and what it's going to cost us. I mean, the latest numbers I'm hearing is that the TIF funds alone on that are going to be $1.1 billion. Now, of course, those are going to go to things like building bridges and roads and the assets that belong to the city. But nevertheless, I'd like to take a higher up view, look from the sky at this. Does Chicago want or need that kind of development?
Well, I think if I haven't looked at the wind studies, shadow studies, or traffic studies because I don't think any have really been done in this area. I think the people that live here and near that area understand how congested it will be at this point. There's really no transportation options in that area. There really is no schools. So what are we building? a city without a structure, really. And it's our taxpayer money that's going to help this developer. They can fend for themselves. It's another scheme, and it's another payoff scheme as the mayor's leaving office to help his friends, and that's all this is.
You know, I do find there's something about me that I find kind of exciting about the idea that I'm living in a city that's so dynamic that with all its problems, developers still want to do mega projects in our city. And I think that's really, there's something about that that's kind of cool, I have to say.
Yeah, because they benefit mega dollars, yes.
Well, but
yes.
I mean, I'm saying that says to me that there's still something healthy about our city, that it's still seen as being a good place to go and make a fast buck doing this kind of thing. But that aside, the idea that we seem to be racing to make the commitment to get this all done, it does have a little bit of a whiff of parking, the parking fiasco to it. I mean, it's just like, it's okay, don't worry, everything's all right, just sign here.
Well, I think it even gets to be worse. Because the parking meter was a lot of paperwork. We were promised to have buckets that money would still be utilized today in all 75 years, but it turned out to be false, because people were lied to, including me.
You voted for it, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. You must regret that.
I do, because I spent 5 hours, and I hear one of the candidates who's running for mayor, and she says, "Oh, I voted against it." I remember when she got up and said, "I didn't have enough time to analyze this deal." We were talking about that for 14 months, and we knew it, but it was during the recession also. But to move on to the topic of Lincoln Yards, you know, they're just pushing this through. It seems like everything moves on their game plan. All of a sudden, a stadium's here and it's out, and the alderman is saying, "Go ahead, it's okay. We can do that." No public input. This mega project should have taken not just 2 meetings, but 5 or 10 even, to have real input from the public.
Do you believe that Brian Hopkins is managing this the way the alderman who ends up being the alderman of pretty much this whole thing, is he doing a good job?
No, I don't think so. And you know, he's unopposed, so it makes it easy to side with the developers.
How did that happen, by the way? How did he become unopposed?
I don't know. I mean, people are all wondering and shaking their head too.
Yeah.
But it happens.
It does happen. I mean, as we said from the beginning, it's sort of like, here you are, this guy who's been criticizing the budget. We don't need him messing around with this Lincoln Yards thing. Let's see what we can do. So anyway, let's just talk a little bit just about, I don't like spend a lot of time on this kind of stuff, but your own finances. I mean, you've only got, according to the state records, you got like $520,000 in the kitty.
600 plus. It's close to 700.
But 500 of that came from Buddy Guy.
Yes, it did.
Yeah.
Yes, it did.
And that's was his place in your ward? Is that what the connection was?
In the old ward it was, but I knew him before I was elected. I have to tell you, I'm really humbled.
I'm sure you are. He's kind of your Chance the Rapper, if you don't mind my being glib about it.
I don't think I'm going to have Chance the Rappers, especially in light of the new allegations that have come out against his favorite candidate. But, you know, I am really humbled by it. I mean, we have talked for years, even before I was the alderman, about a vision for the city. And he said he was going to send over a check, and I was speechless.
Yeah. I had no idea that he was so civically engaged. I mean, I'm sorry for not knowing that, but I didn't see him as being one of those kind of people who had like a vision for the city and all that.
Well, when you talk to him, he does have I mean, he's sort of like the way my dad came up and what happened here in this city. You know, my dad was only made it to 7th grade, but and he was an immigrant. My dad, Buddy, came up from the South. He believes in promoting young people. He believes in making sure young people get a good education, that at the same time that they work hard and they give back to the community, and that's what Buddy Guy is all about. He had the legion of people that he has helped in the music industry and otherwise is unbelievable. And again, I am I choke up about it.
Yeah. I have to say that one of the things, and I certainly don't mean to be rude about this, but one of the things that I haven't understood about your campaign so far is that I can't get a fix on who your constituents are. You know, if you look at Amara Enya, you can go down the list, Bill Daley, you can say, well, this cohort would be his or her natural supporters and stuff. I don't quite get a fix on you. Who are your supporters?
It's the people that are being squeezed out of the city, black, white, brown. People that can't make it anymore. People that are being pushed to the end because of their taxes. My campaign numbers are low because I don't accept money from developers. I don't accept money from lobbyists. Somewhere along the line, I realized that all these people that were coming into my office were lobbyists. City Hall is controlled by lobbyists, and I fought against them from day one. When I had my ward night every Monday, I would say, I had a sheet that you'd fill out and why you're sort of here, and are you a registered lobbyist? And it was always surprising to see that checked box. I'm fighting to bring control of City Council and the City Hall back to the people of this city, and they're the people that are being that are voiceless. All the other candidates, are part of this political structure. I don't think any of them aren't. At this time, and they've got big money behind them.
You've had some good help from Mayor Emanuel, though, right? You had that thing over at Manny's, right?
Yeah, he didn't help me.
He didn't. I thought he
No, and
gave you some financial support.
I wish he would have, because if he did, I would never be running. It would have. He never gave me a penny.
Oh, okay.
And I thought, he shows up at a fundraiser that I had and said 2 cents. He said 2 cents, didn't give me 2 cents.
I'm just looking at press reports that I've seen about it.
And that was started.
Here you are standing.
That was
with him
started
at
by
Manny's.
a few of the union people, and I know who they were on that morning, saying, "Oh yeah, I got bought off." They were all saying they were going to buy me off. I'm not bought,
Well, looking at your numbers, I'd say.
Right. Well, it's hard when you're going to take small contributions, and when you're on the phone to ask for a few dollars here and a few dollars there, and that's humbling in and of itself too.
And by the way, thanks for doing this, because I know that one of the things you had scheduled for today was dialing for dollars, and you're doing this instead of dialing for dollars. So I do very much appreciate that. Okay, let's get off of this stuff and talk about some of the really major issues.
What, the White Sox and Cubs, or?
Well, the Cubs. Now there's an interesting issue, huh? I mean, just that alone, it's like, so that's where all your hot dog money went. It's all going to support the President of the United States.
Oh my goodness,
that's a different discussion,
right.
I suppose. Elected school board. Let's start there.
Okay.
Elected school board.
I drafted the ordinance. I drafted the ordinance to put it on as a referendum. I gave it to one of the other aldermen. We had signatures on it. He got to the other alderman's office, and he was told to wait. It got passed.
We got to figure out the other 3 questions to put on the ballot.
It got past the 11 o'clock, and we couldn't put it on the ballot. I am in favor of an elected school board. I always have been.
Philosophically, why is an elected school board for Chicago better than other models? Let's put it that way.
Well,
why?
I think we're one of the few throughout the country of major cities that do not have an elected school board. We're the only one in the state of Illinois that does not have an elected school board. Do I think it'll solve all the problems overnight? No, it won't. But we need to have the voice of the constituents in there and involved.
So you're in the 100% elected camp?
Yes, I am.
None of this hybrid stuff for you?
No. But we need a vision on where education should go, how we promote our kids, how we, when I say elevate them in terms of academic studies and what we need to do. How do we get rid of the income inequality issues within our school system? How we help the homeless kids? And we've got, when I started as alderman and ended, we had 20,000 homeless kids in our school system. How do we teach them when they have to go home somewhere every night that's different? We've got challenges, and so we have to meet them head on.
And an elected school board does that how?
No, I think we need a long-term range. And so, like I said, it won't solve our problems either financially or education-wise, but we've got to bring educational opportunities throughout the whole of our city, including and I've said it over and over again since '07 as we were starting to close them. We need trade schools, we need vocation schools.
Yeah, I think that's becoming a really major issue. What about the idea that Rahm Emanuel had to kind of rethink the colleges and make them more like training academies? Was that a good step?
Well, when I heard about it the first time, I thought it was a bad step. They were getting rid of all the nursing programs at Olive Harvey. They were going to take all the students in that area, take a bus to come to Malcolm X. Same thing, because there's some intertwinedness between them. I thought it was a ridiculous idea, because people aren't going to travel that high. Enrollment's down in the city colleges. Same thing and it's been declining for 15, 20 years. So I thought it was a bad idea.
So you're saying that the way it was rolled out, and this idea of doing clusters of things was a bad idea, but the idea of changing the emphasis to make it more career-oriented was probably not a bad idea?
Oh, I think it's, I have 12, 14 hours from Olive Harvey that I've utilized to go to U of I. And they were all transferable, all the courses that I took at the time. I think, our community college system, our city college system has a important role of keeping educational costs down for working class people, so we can move on to a 4-year degree if we so desire.
One of the things that has been a frequent topic of discussion on this program is the incessant move forward on the part of the management of Chicago Public Schools to attempt to privatize everything they can get their hands on. And that appears to me to have been it's my opinion, it's an experiment that has not succeeded.
Right.
Where do you stand on that? Do you think that in general the idea of privatizing, like engineers and all that stuff, was a bad idea?
Well, the problem is they gave the, I did sponsor the resolution, and I was co-sponsoring the resolution that had a hearing on all these issues. And we said it was bad then. I still think the way it was handled, who got the contract, the oversight, all made sure, it turned out to be a disaster for our students, teachers, and other people that work in those school systems. It could have been much better if they so desired. But yes, privatization of those essential services led to the problems that we have, and should probably never have happened.
As we're talking this morning, the second of Chicago's charter school clusters is now on strike. Teachers are striking. I find this endlessly fascinating because it just opens so many conversations about charters and what they were intended to be and what they're becoming and everything else. What's the future of charter schools, and what would their future be under a Bob Fioretti administration?
Well, I'm going to give you a lead-in. There were about 4 or 5. I sat on zoning my last 4 years. There were about 4 or 5 charter schools going through zoning for approval. I would call up the CPS liaison to the city council and say, are you aware that there's a charter school going through? They would say to me, oh yeah, it's not a problem. It's part of our deal. Okay. I find out that it's all part of the deal to help the union as I look back. Charter schools do have a role. I've always said that, but the problem is we have right now this proliferation of charter schools have sapped the neighborhood schools and the resources. I did create boundaries around charter schools. And other aldermen called me up and said, how can I have a boundary? What should I do? And they do have a role, but not right now. We need a moratorium until we work out our problems that we have.
Did I just understand you to say that
Yes,
part
you
of the
did.
reason that charters were introduced in the system was because it was a deal between the city and the CTU?
Yes, it was.
What was the deal?
I think they were going to make sure that they had more unionized teachers, and they were planning it that way.
But the CTU was vocally opposed to
They
the
are now.
introduction of charters.
They are now, or they were.
They were.
But look at these are all part and parcel that are going on strike, are part and parcel of CTU.
I mean, I've recently been wondering what happens when the last of the charters are finally unionized and all the teachers are getting paid the same, because one of the big drawing cards for charter schools was that the teachers weren't paid as much.
So they say, yes. And now, and our teachers need good pay. I mean, that's first and foremost. In fact, I was just on the phone earlier today with a woman at one of the schools, a charter school, who has been, she's been attacked a number of times in that school. The students don't listen to anybody, and they have a whole host of issues. She needed some assistance. You look at our teachers need good pay. They need good resources. They need libraries. They need wraparound services for their students. We need to help all of our areas to elevate all of our kids to make sure that they have the opportunity to go to college if they so desire, or the opportunity to have find a trade or a vocation to utilize when they're old enough, and not being out in our community and being unemployed or being left off to the side.
I want to just move on. I could, believe me, we could talk about this for the rest of the show with no trouble at
Right.
all. I think it's
Yes.
one of the critical issues that's facing us. But maybe we should talk. Let's just talk just briefly about O'Hare. O'Hare, congratulations to the city of Chicago. O'Hare just became the busiest airport in the country again yesterday or something. Can you give some props to Mayor Emanuel for finishing Daley's vision of having a parallel runway airport that allows for more operations every day and all that? Is this a success?
Well, no, I don't think it is. And I don't think just because we jump up into the numbers solves the problems that we have around the airports. Pollution, noise, the issues that are affecting the residents up there. Changing the runways are one thing, but we have a lot of airports around the city. I think it's a patronage dumping ground still. O'Hare is, and partially Midway. The best thing that happened may have been the new vendor contracts that were up there that was taken away from one of the candidates' families, as a matter of fact.
One of the mayoral candidates.
A mayoral candidate, yes. But we have Rockford, we have Lansing, we have the Gary Chicago International Airport that should be utilized. Peatone is now coming closer into the final portion of land acquisition. And if that happens, yeah.
They're still acquiring land?
Oh, yes. They've been, under Quinn, they took a huge portion of land. I think we're just 10% less now of the final footprint that's necessary for that airport.
Do you think Peatone is going to get built?
The state then owns a lot of land. They better figure out what they're going to do. And who knows under this governor, because he's going to be listening to the mayor and maybe the speaker as to whether or not they will acquire the final 10%.
So would Mayor Fioretti be in favor of a Peatone airport?
I'm going to have to sit down on all the airports, because I think we need a better way to utilize from Rockford to Gary and the airports in between. For cargo reasons, for other reasons. It's one thing to say, oh yeah, we finished all this off. Well, maybe we should be using Rockford for cargo, or even we can't find a user at Gary International. We're spending $5 million a year over there. Our taxpayer money for that compact that was signed in the 1990s. So what are we doing?
I just read an article about, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting it now. This is not something I prepared for, but Elwood, isn't it? Elwood, Illinois, that is a town that essentially got purchased by the logistics companies that came in and basically have built the largest intermodal operation anywhere in the country right there. It's 40 miles south of Chicago. It's on the major interstates, and it's a huge intermodal thing. It's on 3 or 4 railroads. Maybe they know something about Peatone that I didn't know about.
I think
because Peatone would be
right.
real convenient for them.
Yes, exactly.
All right. Well, anyway, okay. All right. We can't keep doing this. You, of course, are in favor of building the Hyperloop from downtown to O'Hare. I know you're very much in favor of that.
I am.
Giving some money to Elon Musk.
I am.
I just assumed it.
Yeah, no, I'm not ready to give him any money, and I will tell you, the ongoing saga of a high-speed whatever to get there just gets to be more and more laughable. If he's going to spend all of his money and all of his time and reimburse the city for all of their time that we put into it and permits and things, well, go ahead and have it, but I don't see it coming.
So you're just not in favor of modernization and rethinking technology?
Is that what it is? Is that what it is?
I don't know.
I mean,
that's what I heard. Yeah.
No, that's what we heard, right?
In the real world, back down here on Earth, what about the extension to 130th Street of the Red Line?
Well, I've always been in favor of the Red Line extension. I thought it would promote economic opportunity straight down as we go, and we should go all the way up to Indiana. I foresee the exodus that's occurring here is going to occur a lot faster when the South Shore, which is only one line from here to South Bend, when they create a dual track system, and I see that happening. You look at the exodus, and of course you have 3 Democratic mayors, Gary, Hammond, and Michigan City, working with a Republican governor, and all the counties have approved it, the legislatures approved it. I think when this Trump administration does an infrastructure bill, a lot of that money will create this system here.
That's interesting. I wasn't aware that cooperation was going on.
Oh yeah.
Because I thought the double tracking thing was kind of a dead issue.
No, they're working on it daily. I've been on it. I've talked to the mayors and the economic development
so you'll be able to work in
cities.
the loop and live in Michigan City.
It's happening now.
Wow.
I walked through the federal building a couple months ago, and one of the U.S. Marshals said, you should stay at 5:05. Everybody in this building walks over to Van Buren, and they take the train into Indiana.
Yeah.
So it's happening.
Let's spend our last couple of minutes talking somehow or other, if we can, about police violence, not police violence, police, violence and police relations in the city of Chicago. Mayor Fioretti has got to deal with that on the first day too. Will you sign the consent decree?
Well, the consent decree is here whether we want it or not. I've always said if we would have had a professional running the police department, these problems would never have happened. I've read all 225 pages of the consent decree a couple of times going through it. A lot of it was common sense, budgeting priorities, and true leadership. We haven't had a good leader in the police department for years. And so how do you bring back everybody? I mean, police officers and citizen contact a day, number 5 to 10,000 interactions a day. Our police officers need help. They need backing. You know, we're now on our 6th and maybe a 7th suicide since June. 4 officers have been killed in less than the year. Commander Bauer was killed at the end of this month. You know, the stress is unbelievable on them. They see the worst and the best sometimes of what's happening. We've had 3,000 shootings last year. You arrive on the scene and you're seeing somebody that's dying before you. They try to do what they can, you know, and I've always contended proper training, proper hiring, training, supervision, and discipline. And it's the last two, the supervision and discipline, which has been lacking. I mean, there was an article in the Tribune the other day about the one individual who allegedly shot his friend in the back of his head. It was on the code of silence, $44 million judgment that's under appeal. Well, if you really look at it, he demonstrated the problems that we have. Somewhat drinking, somewhat credit, and problems with several lawsuits against him. Same with Van Dyke. He exhibited those conditions. You know what? The supervisor should have called him in and said, hey, you were sued here, 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 here. What's going on? What are you doing?
All right, so help me understand this. Can the mayor actually begin the process or effectuate the process of reforming the way the Chicago Police Department is run? Does the mayor have that power?
It should have been done a long time ago.
Does the mayor have that power?
Yes, he does, or she does. They have the authority to do that.
How?
And again, it's how you train, how you supervise, and you know, I'm going to make sure we have a professional running the department and saying you're in charge. And the mayor shouldn't be on top of the professional all day long. He or she who runs the department should run it with the acumen of knowing what to do and staying ahead of the problem.
Okay, let me see if I understand. First of all, do you believe that there is a so-called code of silence in the police department?
Well, if there, as opposed to the leadership of the county, as opposed to lawyers, doctors,
The city council.
Especially the city council,
Right.
then there's a code of silence on everything. You know, where is this code of silence? What is the code of silence? And how does it exist? And how is it a practice, a custom?
All right, well then let me ask it a different way. On the assumption that codes of silence exist everywhere, and I think I'm with you on that, every professional group has its own. Doctors, I mean, they all do, right? It's different, though, when we're talking about police because they have the ability to administer swift justice right there on the street. How do you begin to, what am I trying to say?
Unravel it?
Well, how do you begin to stitch together some kind of relationship with the people who are being policed? The people who are being policed are not happy with their police department. I think you'd agree with that.
Well, I think some of them are.
Well,
you can talk to the seniors. You can talk to the people in the community that have had long-term effects. But the community has a code of silence. They refuse it. They've now had somebody witness a murder, and oh yeah, I'm going to be there. I'll be there. And then when they get to the trial, we know what happens. I'm not saying, you know, this is, again, where I started. We have maybe 5,000 to 10,000 interactions a day with police. And they need to come out there. Everybody needs to band together on this. And again, it's supervision. It's how we train. And then we've got to look at the history of an individual who has, or why did they get sued in the first place? What was the underpinnings of that? And when we have a department that's being racked with suicides right now, what is the cause of that? And you know, again, I don't think it's good on either end. We need somebody with good leadership who can bring people together. It's a time for healing in our communities. It's a time to move our city forward. And I don't see any of these other candidates talking about that.
I'll throw one thing out, which I think does connect to a lot of these other things, and that's this rampant use of overtime.
You hit it right on the head. I have been against the use of overtime. Why? Because it wears out the body. How can you make such good decisions if you're now working a big number in terms of
I wouldn't want to be
overtime?
operated on by a surgeon who's coming off of a double shift.
Right.
Yes. And I don't think I'd want to be facing a cop who's on his 15th hour
Right.
either.
I agree with you. And we have to cut down on that. So
And how would you do that?
Well,
I mean,
again, that's
apparently
an issue.
that saves money, right?
Well, it's an issue of management. It's one thing to be out in the streets all that time. You know, hiring more police officers cuts down on that problem.
I have this weird sort of rubbery question that I always like to ask at the end of these conversations, which is imagining this sort of, I don't know, just kind of mythical young couple who just got married and are maybe about to start raising a family, and they're looking at moving to Chicago, and they are very ambivalent about it. They see high violence and they see high costs for everything, and they think maybe I'd be better off in the suburbs or in a medium-sized city. How would you sell them on coming here?
Well, first of all, I think we can talk about what's great about this city. We do have great universities. A lot of them are all located downtown. We do have great cultural events. We do have great sports teams. We do have the educational opportunities, and under me, they will have, wherever they live, in which area they live, they will have those opportunities. I think this is the best city. You know how they have the T-shirts, London, Rome, New York. I've always wanted Chicago on that T-shirt. And yes, I think with the right kind of leadership, right kind of values. You know, people talk about, oh yeah, this is the city value, whatever. But the city values are, we're a tough city. We've come out of nowhere, and we've created opportunities for so many people. And I think under my leadership, we can bring people back, heal the division. Let's stop talking black and brown versus white, like 2 or 3 of these candidates are, and talk about how we're in it together. And we'll solve the problem.
You were born here?
Yes, Roseland Hospital, born and raised.
All right. Well, there you are. I really appreciate you giving me a lot of your time today, because I know time, especially as we're getting so close, every minute is valuable, and I appreciate you being here.
I appreciate it too. Thank you.
Bob Fioretti is running for mayor of the city of Chicago. And of course, obviously, you can go vote today, because early voting is open now, right? Yes, it is. And I'm in that camp of people saying, please don't vote early. Just hold on for a couple of weeks, because there are going to be lots of changes, and we'll be watching those and see what happens.
You're right.
Watching Chicago Newsroom, don't forget you can see all of our shows by going to chicagonewsroom.org. You can see it right here. And specifically, if you go there, the front page will list all of our mayoral interviews, and we'll give you some information too about how you can watch them on CAN TV. Please do that. We'll be back soon with another show. So thanks for watching. Bye-bye.